Hi, I'm Siobhan and welcome to this live coding video. In this one, we're going to be having a go at making if conditions in AppScript. So we're going to be working in Google Drive. I'm working in my section 3 folder. You can see my loops live coding is there. Let's make a new spreadsheet for the ifs coding. So I'm going to go make a new Google Sheet like we have been doing previously. I'm going to call this one ifs live coding, like so. And I don't need to do anything in the spreadsheet, just going to go straight over to the AppScript editor. And then I am going to rename my project as well to ifs live coding, like so. Try and spell it correctly. That doesn't actually matter. Perfect. So we're going to be making two different functions. We're going to have a go at comparing numbers and comparing text in this. To do this. So what is an if before we get started? Well, an if is basically just a condition. So if something is true, do something else. If it's false, do something else. So we're going to be making what I've called, let's rename this one. Let's call this one number if, like so. So we've got number if, and I'm going to rename it to number if, like so in the function as well. Hit enter and hit save. So the reason I keep saying the word if is because that is the terminology we use. That is the word you use in AppScript to create one of these conditions to check if something is true or false and do some code if it's true and optionally some code if it's false as well. So ifs are really useful for doing things like checking, for seeing if things need to happen. They're really good combined with loops, so you can loop through data, and if the data matches a certain condition, you can do one thing with it, and if it doesn't, you could do a different thing, or you could do nothing with it. Ifs are really powerful things. So first of all, we're just going to compare numbers and see how an if condition works. So I'm going to create a variable and call it number, var number, and I'm going to assign it the value of 5. Semicolon. Because it's a number, don't need to put quotes around it. Then I'm going to hit enter and enter again, just so I've got a bit of space, and I'm going to write my if condition. It's pretty straightforward. I write the word if. And at this point, I will note that if you've used spreadsheets a lot, you will have already met ifs. They're quite a common thing you can use in spreadsheets as well, to only do things if a certain condition is true. So we are now going to write the condition that is going to be tested. So we're looking for a true false condition. So I'm going to do space, do some brackets. And what I'm going to test is if my number is less than 10. So I'm going to write number, space, less than, space 10, like so. So if number is less than 10, then I'm going to do some of my good friend, the curly braces, and hit enter. And then I'm going to do some code inside these curly braces that would happen if it is true. So I'm going to write logger.log, brackets, make some quotes. I'm just going to write if statement is true. Because all we're doing is, in this case, is just proving whether it's true or false. And I can end the line with a semicolon. I could have written number is less than 10, because that's perhaps a bit more informative. But in this case, we're just going to illustrate what happens in our statement. Now, I could finish here. And if it's false, it will just do nothing and the code will move on. But typically, you want something to happen if it's false, even if it's just logging to say I'm not doing anything right now, so that when you check the code execution, you can see why some of the things weren't done. So after my little end curly brace, but not after the final one, which ended the functions. If I click on one, I can see its pair is highlighted. After the one that's for the if statement, I'm going to do a little space. I'm going to write else, and then do another set of curly braces and hit enter. So else allows you to do what's going to happen else. So in this case, if it's false is what we mean, else. So sometimes they're referred to as if-else statements, because you have the if it's true and you have the else, which is what happens if it's false. So I'm going to write logger.log, put myself some quote marks in and write if statement is false. And then I'm going to end the line with a semicolon. So now we've got something that will happen if it's true and something that will happen if it's false. So now I'm going to hit save and I'm going to hit run. And it just says if statement is true in my execution log. And you notice it doesn't say if statement is false. So it's only run one of those bits of code, which is exactly what we were expecting. When you write an if statement, it's always worth testing it to make sure the logic is correct. So in this case, I'm going to go back into my code. I'm going to change my number from 5 to 50. And then I'm going to hit save. And then I'm going to hit run. And now you can see it hasn't written if statement is true on the screen. It's only written if statement is false. So what it's done is it's got to this bit, if number is less than 10, it's gone, it's not, that's false. So it ignores this line, it goes straight to the else. Powerful stuff. I tend to recommend you always test the middle case as well. So I like to test what would happen if I put 10 in to make sure I've got my use of signs correctly. So I could hit save, hit run, and it says if statement is false because I've used just less than. It would need to be less than and equal to if I wanted 10 to be included in the true side of things. So this is always a good way to test if you've got your logic as you think you have. So that's a numerical if. It's quite straightforward. Now let's take a look at how we do a text if instead. So it's pretty similar. I'm going to create a new text file, a new script file, getting confused the word text, new script file here, and I'm going to call it text if. So actually what we're comparing is strings, but I've used text just so that we kind of understand what we're talking about. So I'm going to say text if there as well. And then I'm going to hit enter and enter again and hit save. So as I was saying, we're going to compare strings. That is typically text, but you could be comparing things like phone numbers, because phone numbers you typically don't store as a number because you don't add together phone numbers. So we're going to be looking at how you would store things that are strings, so stuff that's inside those quote marks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test two names against each other. So if we had some code where we needed to check if a certain person had been listed on a spreadsheet, for example, and if they had, we'd do something with that. So I'm going to create a variable that's called VAR, and then call it person equals sign, put some quotes, and I'm going to write Eric. And then semicolon. You can write anything you like there. If you'd like to test your own name, please do. If you'd like to test somebody else's name, go for it. And then I'm going to create a test name as well. So I'm going to create VAR, and I'm going to create another variable that says test name equals sign, quotes. I would like you at this point to put the exact same name you put in the first one. So I'm going to write Eric again. Make sure it looks exactly the same capitals, everything in there. So those are our variables we're going to use. Now we can do our if. So I'm going to hit enter and enter again to make a little bit of space. Just going to hit save. There's good practice. And then we're going to do our if condition. So I'm going to write if space brackets, just like we did for the numerical one. And I need to now test a condition to see what's going to be true. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare my two values. So I'm going to write if test name space, and I want to do is equal to, but I can't do that in AppScript. In AppScript and in JavaScript in general, and lots of coding, if I just did one single equal sign, that doesn't mean equals to. That means I'm giving a variable a value. We've already used an equal sign just here. So we can't use the equal sign because that's basically trying to reassign the value of a variable. We have to use two equal signs next to each other. That means equals to. So two equal signs next to each other means equals to. Then I can do the space, and then I'm going to write person. So I could have just put the strings here, but by putting them in variables, we're seeing probably what's more likely to what we'd be doing. We'd be getting variables of data we'd taken from other stuff, and we'd be comparing them in our if condition. So I'm going to see if they match. So here I'm going to put some curly braces at the end again, hit enter, and write some code that will happen if they do match. So I'm going to write logger.log, and then I'm going to do some brackets, and then my quote marks. I'm going to write names match, and then the line with a semicolon. And I'm going to have an else as well. So I'm going to click here. So make sure I'm after these braces, but not after the final braces. I'm going to do a space and write else, and then some more braces, and hit enter. And then I'm going to do another logger.log, logger.log, quotes, names do not match. I've written that in scary capitals. You can write it how you like. And then I'm going to end the line with a semicolon. So this will now compare our names. So let's hit save and see what happens. Hit run. Names match. Brilliant. Okay, let's test what happens if they don't match. So let's change one of them and only one. So I'm going to change the test name. I'm going to change it to Siobhan. That's my name. Spelt weird, I know. Hit save and hit run. Names do not match. So we can see that the text ones work like that. What if we wanted our true to be the fact they didn't match? Because we've got equals, but how do we do does not equal? Well, it's quite fun. Does not equal is exclamation mark equals sign. So test name exclamation mark equals person is the opposite way round. So now I change that one to names do not match and change this one to names match. So the true condition is they don't match and the else is they do. That can be really useful because sometimes you do want to check if it's not true as your main thing. So use exclamation mark equals sign. Like so. If you look on the guide, you can see the list of operators you can use for the comparisons if you need some more information on what those might be. But there we go. We've had a go at comparing both numbers and text strings in an if so that we can work with them, and we can now build this into our code as we want. Thanks for watching.